All right. Okay. So before we continue where we left off, and you'll have to remind me exactly what page. So 71 in this book, and I know they're different editions, so we'll announce the pages in the other edition soon. Dedicate, as we do each time, a special psalm for Rabbi Stautz's full and speedy recovery. This psalm is a psalm that speaks of speech, and his capability to speak has been severely hurt since he stroked 2 years ago. So, with your permission, I'm going to say the psalm in Hebrew. We'll all have Rabbi Adin ben Rivka Leah, the son of Rivka Leah, in mind for his full and speedy recovery. And hopefully, by saying this Tehillim, this psalm, and also by learning his words, the words of his mouth will come back and he'll become healthy and strong and speak once again. All right, Psalm 45. All right, so as mentioned, we'll continue at the bottom of page 71. Just to recap very quickly, we were speaking about the power of Torah in general and how Torah is not just from heaven, it is heaven. We also spoke about the emphasis of action in the Torah. Out of the many commandments, the 613 commandments that we find in the Torah, most of them are action-oriented because we believe that that's the strongest way to connect with God. At first, he spoke about that being the highest level of pleasure, but also in the context of this world and the next, of heaven and earth, action, actualizing the Torah, right, in deed, is really what transforms this world also into a spiritual world. And therefore, really, materialism, and that was the main point, if I remember correctly, from what we studied, materialism shouldn't be seen as an enemy, as an obstruction to our spiritual service, but materialism should actually be seen as a means to our spiritual service. It's not something we ought to fight against, it's something that we ought to elevate and, in a way, transform. And that's why materialism also can be potentially the most spiritual thing. So the example that we gave was a penny. If I give a penny to charity, that penny can be very materialistic. It's money. It's a coin. It's earthly. It's got nothing to do with God. But the minute I gave it to charity, then it becomes the holiest item I have, the holiest item I don't have anymore. I've given to the poor. So again, this world is really a means to our spiritual service, and by using this world in such a way, we are also really making sure that this world and heaven bridge, that they kiss in a way, and that they really become one. One, I will say, as it was at the beginning of creation. This world, right? Adam and Eve were born into a paradise. They were born into a world that was already entirely spiritual. That's what paradise is. That even though Adam and Eve lived in a world where you had materialism, not like that paradise, but in this world was paradise. It was very spiritual. The reason for that is because that's when materialism really was holy, and then they sinned, and then this world, in a way, was divorced from God, from heaven, and it lost that spiritual realm. But each time we use this world to do a mitzvah, again, we reconnect it to heaven, and we transform it to that which it once was, if you think about it that way. So that's the big idea that we've been discussing. Now let's continue on a little more. And again, I welcome questions, comments. That's how we are supposed to learn. But does anyone want to read? Here we're at the bottom of page 71. Again, what is surprising is that with the great quantity, right, which is, I think, unique also to Judaism, to the Torah itself, that we don't find this world, any aspect of this world, as mentioned, to be an enemy of God. It just depends how you use it. It's true with characteristics too. No characteristic is negative. Unlike Christianity that believes that there are 7 cardinal sins, for example, including envy, gluttony, and so on. In Judaism, envy can be very good, right? If you're envious of a spiritual person, it will make you more spiritual. So why not? Our Simcha Buni of Shishcha, one of the great Hasidic masters, would say that he attributes his greatness in his scholarship to his neighbor who was a poor tailor. Why? Because each morning he would hear his tailor work, getting up early to work, and he would say to himself, well, if he's getting up early to work as a tailor, And why shouldn't I get up early to study? So he started getting up earlier than the tailor. Then the tailor heard him. So the tailor started getting up early. He says, that poor man is doing this not even to make a living, just to study. I should be getting up earlier. So he started, and it was like a race for a long time. He was getting up earlier and earlier. But at the end of the day, made Rabbi Simcha Bunim of Shishcha more of a scholar. So what's wrong with envy? It depends how you use it. And it's true again with every aspect of this world. And that's why he says here that this world is not repudiated at all. No field of action or thought is repudiated by the Torah. Because it all depends how you use it. And if we have the wisdom to use it and the vision to use it in a spiritual way, then even the most mundane or the most materialistic matter is turned into spiritual. So that's the big idea of this paragraph. Now he develops this idea here on page 72. Unless someone wants to say anything, we can just continue here with the next few sentences. Yes. No, it does make sense. It's the human condition. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, was known as the advocate of Israel, who would always judge people to the side of merit, always find positivity even within negativity. Many stories about him. There's a story about a man who was, I think, 85 years old, who was righteous, and at the age of 85, he really made a 180-degree change and became very corrupt and immoral. And people came to tell Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev about this man. Look what happened to him. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev says that what happened to him only increases my admiration towards him. They said to him, why? He said, because look how strong this man must have been. For 85 years, the evil inclination tried to get him, and he stayed strong. Finally, after 85 years, he got it. But the strength that this man must have is superhuman. But that's judging people on the side of merit. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev was once caught on Rosh Hashanah praying and shouting to God. And he said, God, you're unfair. Because you created this world in a way that matter is what we see and therefore is what is luring. And spirit is what we don't see and therefore is not luring. If you had created this world where spirit is what we saw and therefore was luring, and matter was what we did not see, I promise you every one of us would be righteous. So what do you want from us? That's to answer your question. We live in such a world where really that's what we see. So unfortunately, envy and all these characteristics are turned in the wrong direction. And I agree with Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. He was right. It's another story about Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, who I don't know if I've shared with you the story, but on the way to synagogue on Yom Kippur, he saw a Jew eating in a non-kosher restaurant. He was on his way to shul, and he was stunned to see this Jew eating. So he went up to him and he said, maybe you forgot that today's Yom Kippur. He said, no, I didn't forget. I don't care. He said, maybe you forgot that this restaurant it's not kosher, at least in a kosher. He says, no, I know, I don't care. He says, maybe you're eating because of health reasons, then you're allowed to eat. He says, no, I'm completely healthy. I'm just fine. He kept trying to find a positive spin, and he couldn't. And at the end, he just turned his eyes to the heavens and he said, Master of the universe, look how special your people are. No matter how much you push them to the corner, they'll always tell the truth. That's the way he was. So he's right. If God had created the world where we saw spirit and did not see matter, that would be a whole different world. We'd all be righteous. Let's continue on here with a few more sentences here on page 72. Pragmatic examination. Does anyone want to read? Please. Right. I just want to focus just on this point. And that is, it's really rooted, this teaching is really rooted in the Mishnah, in Ethics of our Fathers, that says, En lecha ben chorin ela mi she'osek b'Torah. That really there's no one more free than a person that deals with Torah, or that studies Torah, or that follows the Torah. If you think about that statement, which is really more or less what he's saying here, is that you think that, well, that's doesn't make sense. If you deal with Torah, it's interesting, and I'm using the word that the Mishnah uses, dealing with Torah, ela mi she'osek b'Torah, not study Torah. Because Torah is not a matter just of the mind exercising itself. It's the matter of the whole body. You immerse yourself in the Torah. Your whole life becomes Torah. That's why the word to deal with Torah, lasok, not just to study. But if you deal with Torah in such a way, then really, if you think about it, you're very limited. The Torah tells you, don't do this, and do this, don't do this. You must become robotic. So it's very limiting. And it's not free. So, there's no more free person than that's the most enslaved person. But really, the idea here is exactly what it's saying. The Torah really is there to almost reframe the word freedom, because there's no such thing as freedom. I hate to tell you, and you can tell your children, you can tell people in our generation that seek freedom. There's no such thing as freedom. You're always a slave to something. Always. If you think freedom means to lie on a beach and get a good suntan, well, then you're a slave to your body. If you think freedom is reading a good book, then you're a slave to your mind. You're always a slave to something. So what is freedom then? Why do we use this word if it doesn't exist? And that is because we're always a slave to something. But if we become a slave to one thing, and that frees us, that liberates us, then we can attain freedom. What's that one thing? To our true deeper self. If we can become a slave to the desires of a true deeper self, to the soul, and the soul is able then to unleash itself, then we can become free. As long as I am dependent on external circumstances to become free, on a good book, on a good beach, on a good makeup, on a good whatever it may be, then I will never be free. But if I'm dependent only on myself, only on my deeper soul, then I am free, because that's the soul that will find liberation. Now, for that soul to come out, it needs direction, it needs rules, it needs a pathway. And that's where the Torah comes into play. And that's why the Mishnah says that one who deals with Torah, who creates a structure for that soul, so that the soul can really express itself in this world, then is a person that will be free. It's almost like if my hand tomorrow decides, you know what, I hate being tied to this brain here. I don't want to be a part of this body. I want to be free. And it ties itself off and it goes and wanders. It won't be free anymore. It will be the worst thing that will happen to the hand. Because every hand needs structure, needs direction. That's why it can be free specifically when it's tied to the brain. If you play the violin, if you play any type of instrument, if the violin, for example, has strings, right? If one of those strings says, you know what, I don't want to be a part of this violin anymore. I don't want to be tuned by it. I want to walk out and go and roam the streets by myself. Why do I have to play their songs? Why do I have to act this way? I won't be free anymore. I was saying this on Shabbat, but I told a group of teenagers last week to use their language. But I said to them, if you had a beautiful roof, but it was completely open, and you had this urge to play football, would you play football? He said, no, we could fall off the roof if it didn't have any enclosures. I said, well, that's what the Torah is about. It gives you that fence. And then you can play the game of life, and you won't fall off. That's the Torah. It gives you that structure. And this is exactly what he's saying, that the more a person deals with Torah, the more it confers upon him considerable freedom, like Rabbi Stein is saying here, in almost every area, because it gives you direction. You know, I've said this before, but Viktor Frankl, who came to the United States in 1961, I believe, he came and they showed him the Statue of Liberty. And they said to him, you know, that represents the freedom of the United States. He said, that's great. But if your Statue of Liberty is not balanced with the Statue of Responsibility, it doesn't mean anything. Because liberty without responsibility is chaos. It's not liberty. And he said, maybe you should put the Statue of Liberty off the coast of California, because that's where they need it most. We mentioned this on Sunday morning. But in a way, it's so true. That's what Torah does. It gives us that focus. And so we can see all of these limitations as limitations, or we can see them as really the beautiful construction of a pathway for the soul. And that's really what Torah is. Otherwise, it's chaos. And I find a lot of correlation between the world of music and the world of Judaism, but you find that a lot in music. Funny enough, I was speaking to Peter Himmelman, was here a few weeks ago, and I was speaking to him a lot about this. He said it's interesting because in music, on the one hand, you have to be completely devoted to the structure of music, to the structure of any piece that you play. You have to know the exact rhythm, the exact notes, how to play them, piano forte or not, just piano, and so on. On the other hand, you also have to forget yourself in that music. You have to play in the most heartfelt, spontaneous way. So you have this dichotomy in music. On one hand, you have to be devoted to the structure, and on the other hand, they tell you, no, just express yourself completely without any structure. But what makes a good musician is exactly that they know how to unleash themselves within the structure of music. Without the structure of music, the music is not music, it's just noise. And I think that's life, that's Judaism. It gives you that structure. It tells you play this note this way and have the rhythm this way. But on the other hand, that's what enables really your soul to soar. True freedom is the freedom of what's inside, not what's outside. And they devoted themselves in a way to that, right? Search for meaning, how he calls it. And that there's no greater freedom than that. But that freedom also, for it to sustain itself, needs direction. It's interesting, by the way, Viktor Frankl put on tefillin every day. And and in fact, Leo Abrami, Alav Shalom, who was a part of our community, Rabbi Leo Abrami, some of you may remember him, he was a witness to that. He was a student of Viktor Frankl, and he's the one who told me that. But so you see, he had also that structure for that purpose, to really run wild, to soar. But it's interesting, we were speaking about this, and we fell on this paragraph just before Passover. I think that's what Passover is about. On the one hand, think about this. I don't think there's another holiday that puts more restraints on a person. Just the preparations for Passover already can drive you crazy. Cleaning the house and so on. And then you're not allowed to eat this, you're not allowed to eat that, and you can only have matzah, and then you have the Seder that takes quite a long time, and then all these limits and restrictions and commandments. But on the other hand, all of that really serves as the platform for your soul then to soar into freedom. And I think that's really what Judaism is about. That's what Torah is about. Without that, like Viktor Frankl said, it's chaos. There's two words for freedom in Hebrew. There's the word chofesh that we spoke about, I know, 2 weeks ago. But chofesh means freedom, but it also means to search. That's because someone who is free is someone who searches within himself to unleash that deeper self. If you think freedom is by eating a good ice cream, then you missed the point. Freedom is through searching. That's number one. Number two, the other word for freedom in Hebrew is cherut. Passover is called Zman Cherutenu, the time of our freedom, cherut. Cherut also means in Hebrew engraving, charut, to engrave. Why? Because again, it alludes to this idea that freedom comes from the expression of that which is engraved in you, that which is an indelible part of you. It doesn't come from any outside circumstances. It comes from you. It comes from that, the print or the imprint that God left you with when you were born, that which is engraved. That's really what Passover is about. I'll say just one more thing about freedom. Passover is called freedom, and it's based on this idea that the Jewish people were liberated. The verse, we mentioned this on Sunday during our soul class, but we have to emphasize this. If you can help me spread this word or this clarification, I think it would help people better understand this notion of freedom. But, the statement that was recycled when Jews were imprisoned in the Soviet Union was "Let my people go." The statement that represents the story of the Grand Exodus. Let my people go. But we forget that was not the full statement of Moses. If you look in the Torah, and each time he said to Pharaoh, "Let my people go," he didn't just say, "Let my people go." He didn't say, "Shlach ami." He said, "Shlach et ami ve'yavduni." Let my people go, and they will worship me. And they will worship God. In other words, Moses was making a point to tell Pharaoh and to tell the Jewish people that freedom, just for the sake of freedom, won't lead you anywhere. It will lead you to slavery again. But if freedom has a pathway of worshiping God, ve'yavduni, then that freedom can be sustained. And again, like what Viktor Frankl was saying, so if you hear people saying, "Let my people go" is the theme, no. Correct them. Say, "Let my people go, and they will worship me." Ve'yavduni. Let's not forget that word. That's the theme. Because without that worship, there's really no freedom. So let's continue a little bit more. It's interesting. What is the role of a leader? So we've mentioned this in the past, that really Moses and the ultimate leaders knew how to channel God into this world. And they became the ultimate channels where God flowed through them, and therefore people came to them. That's where they were able to feel that flow of God. But the fake leaders maybe had that same potential. The problem is that they got confused, and they started to relate to their channel as the thing itself. And that's when it became dangerous. Like Shabtai Tzvi, like Jesus, like others. That's correct. It's like a musician playing Beethoven thinking that he himself is Beethoven. No, you can flow. You can be the flow for Beethoven. Excuse me, you're not Beethoven. Which makes the point that we spoke a lot about in the chapter of holiness, and that is that when there's so much holiness, there's also so much forces that try to oppose that holiness. And therefore, it's really a dangerous tension. And that's why the high priest, for example, was allowed in the Holy of Holies, the holiest place in the world, only once a year. Even the high priest, who was a holy man, who never came out of the temple. Because that Holy of Holies had so much holiness that it can blind you in many ways, not just physically, but psychologically, mentally. It can fool with you. It's so intense. It's like, there's a difference between me touching this light bulb, or even the wire that connects the light bulb to the switch, and going to a power station. At a power station and you start playing with those wires, it's a whole different story. And I think it's the same idea here. If you go to the Holy of Holies, which is the power station of Holy, and Jerusalem, in a way, is a power station in and of itself. Cute story about the Tzemach Tzedek, who was one of the great Hasidic rabbis, who actually was raised by his grandfather because his parents died when he was young. And his grandfather was the author of the Tanya, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. And one day he was playing in the park with some of his friends, and his grandfather came to see him play, and they were playing, him and his friends were playing the game of who can climb to the highest point of the tree, of a specific tree in that park. A game that is dangerous, right? But kids love to play that game anyhow. In America today, they would have never let them, but I guess then in Russia, they were free to do whatever they wanted, so they were playing that game. And the Tzemach Tzedek, who was a young boy, won the game. He climbed to the highest point of the tree. So the Alter Rebbe, his grandfather, afterwards came to him and said, "Congratulations, I just saw you won the game. What made you win? How were you so successful?" And the boy said, "Oh, it's easy. Well, I saw that when my friends were climbing the tree, my friends before me, when they're climbing the tree, the second they looked downwards, they became so scared that they had to come down. I said to myself, then it will be my turn. When I'll climb the tree, I'm going to only look upward. And if I look upward the whole time, I know I'll win." So his grandfather said, "You see, you just gave yourself a lesson for life. If you're always connected upward, you can never fall." And I think that's the idea. That's what Judaism, right? Even in the most mundane acts, so that we don't fall, we connect ourselves upward. And we think of God, even when we tie a shoelace and so on, because it doesn't enable us to fall. And all the mitzvahs, I would say, are like those ropes, really, that connect us. Without them, it's chaos. Okay, all right, let's continue a little bit more. A unified pattern of life. Is that where we are yet? Yeah. A unified pattern of life. Does anyone want to read? Right. So, because the whole idea is, again, to harmonize between this world and God, and the heavens. And the more this world becomes heavenly, the more, therefore, it can dance, this tango dance, so to speak, right? With the heavens. But if there's a disharmony, there's no connection whatsoever, then there can't really be a dance. And in a way, I think that's the whole goal of humanity, is to create a place and abode for God in this world, so that this dance can take place. So then heaven and earth can really flow. They say, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe once said that about himself. They asked him, he was known to give up many blessings, many miracles. Doctors told them that they would die, they gave them a blessing and they lived. And woman who couldn't have children, he gave them blessings and he had children. So all these miracles. And they once asked him, so what's the key? What's the secret? How can you create miracles? How do you do it? And he said, I don't create miracles. I just follow God. And by following God, you create miracles, because then God, in a way, right, he didn't say that, but that was his answer, I just follow God. But the interpretation, of course, is because when you follow God, then you have this dance happening. And then God can come and change reality, because he's in sync with reality. If he's not in sync with reality, how are you going to create that flow of divinity that comes to change reality? So the more you follow God, the more you're a slave in a way, right? To that soul, that divinity, the more that dance happens. Just speaking of that last sentence here, that therefore any type of artistic expression of God in particular, there's actually a halacha that states so. Maimonides expounds on this a lot, and about how one is prohibited to draw God. Speaks of the great prohibition to limit God in any shape or form. You're not allowed to draw God. You're not allowed to draw any expression of God. Why? Because God is so much more than that. God is not limited to anything. God is heaven. God is infinite. And therefore, drawing him as a baby face or anything is prohibited. But in Rabbi Stein takes this to a deeper step here. He says the reason you're not allowed to give an expression of detailed expression to God or to any type of spiritual experience is, again, because then you'll be making it earthly, while your task is to do the opposite, to make the earth infinite. So to give an infinite expression, not a finite expression to yourself and to the world around you. Again, because inside of you, you have that soul, that infinity, and it needs expression. And the more you express it, the more you create this godly world that then can dance along with the heavens. So that's the big idea. Rabbi Steinsaltz is known. I've heard Rabbi Steinsaltz say this many times. And actually, it's on a YouTube. You can maybe even YouTube Rabbi Steinsaltz God, and you'll see like an interview that he has with Ted Koppel, the foremost anchor, or you can even just Google Ted Koppel, Rabbi Steinsaltz, and Ted Koppel actually asks him a question. He says, how would you describe God to children? And Rabbi Steinsaltz says that the problem that many teachers have is that they think that they need to humanize God, and they need to describe God as God with a big white beard and a carrot in the one hand and a stick on the other hand. And he says, and that's what really moves people away from God. Because who would want to relate as they grow up to a God that's so humanized? And therefore he says you'll be surprised that children actually, out of all of the different segments of our society, children are the ones who can connect to the God of our books more than even adults. And therefore we shouldn't put any limits to that description of God. When we speak of God as infinite, as that infinite light, as the Or Ein Sof, children connect to that. When we speak to God as the omnipresent God, children resonate with that. And we don't have to put any barriers. God is the master of the universe, that he's the creator who keeps creating. He's the only existence. Ein od milvado. And he's that Or Ein Sof. Children connect to that much more than adults, actually. So Rabbi Steinsaltz is of that opinion. It's interesting to note that. I'll never forget, but I also participated in a debate between Rabbi Steinsaltz and Michael Steinhardt. Michael Steinhardt is in the news not flatteringly not long ago, but Michael Steinhardt is a big philanthropist who started Birthright. But he's interesting, and he calls himself an atheist. And I remember there was a nice discussion in New York a few years ago between Robert Steinsaltz and him, and I went to be with my rabbi, and they debated, and he spoke about God, and Michael Steinhardt spoke about how he doesn't believe in God, and so on, and went back and forth. At the very end, and you have to know Rabbi Steinsaltz can be very harsh and can be very blunt. And so at the very end, they said to Rabbi Steinsaltz, do you want to say maybe one last word? Michael Steinhardt said a last word, and it was Rabbi Steinsaltz to say a last word. And Rabbi Steinsaltz says, I think I can summarize this entire conversation with one strong feeling that I have, and that is that I think that Michael Steinhardt is still upset at his Hebrew school teachers. And I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was brilliant because the Hebrew school teachers teach you of a God that's very limited. So of course you reject it. Of course you become an atheist. Yeah. But if they had taught him the truth, then maybe it would have been different. Yeah. And Rabbi Steinsaltz decided to put it in that way. Wow. But it was very powerful. Okay, excellent. All right, well, I want to take this opportunity to wish you all a Chag Sameach, Happy Pesach. We should really be free in the full sense of the word. and it should permeate every area of our lives.